Hi, my name is Julie, and I'm a library associate with the programming department here at Rutgers Library. Thank you all for attending tonight's program, Natural and Organic Gardening. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to check out our other upcoming events. You can go to our website at www.woodbridgelibrary.org and click on the calendar to see everything. You can register there. I'd also like to remind you all that everyone is going to be on mute for the duration of the program in order to keep the focus on our speaker. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can send them directly to me and we'll do a Q&A at the end. All right, so today I'd like to welcome back Rutgers Master Gardener, Pat Donahue, and I'm gonna turn things over to you now, Pat.
Okay, so you just have to give me a minute to work the Zoom magic and get this set up the way it's supposed to look. So now you should all see just one screen that's green. So Julie, are we good? Yes, can you hear me? We're good? Okay. So first, a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's and a master's in environmental protection. And after 15 years in government and corporate positions protecting the environment, I went into teaching. And I spent 23 years as a public school science teacher. And upon retirement, another science teacher who had retired a little bit before me, she was interested in gardening. And I said, well, I'll do the Master Gardening program if you will. And she said, well, I'll do it if you will. And we completed a 15-month program with Middlesex County. It's the most difficult program of all the ones that are in the state of New Jersey. And because I was a teacher, it kind of naturally fell to me to do some of these, what we call the Speakers Bureau. So here I am. And I was asked to put this together a couple of years ago. And I have updated it a little bit. But what we're going to cover today is how to avoid the use of virtually all chemicals in your garden and how to substitute safer alternatives. So I want to start with a little bit of vocabulary to make sure that when we're using certain terms that we really understand what we're talking about. So the first is, what do we mean by natural? What is natural? So if you look up a definition, you'll get two that are very similar. It's something that is actually in nature. It is not artificial. And it occurs over the course of nature. There is nothing supernatural or man-made. Is not caused by anything other than the properties of nature. So what is natural? So I show this picture. All right, we have grass, we have a hedge, we see some leaves from a tree. And so we would say, okay, these things are natural, they're not fake, they're not man-made, but it certainly doesn't look like what nature would look like if we weren't interfering with it. So here's another one. Is this natural? Well, it's better than the last one. There are more variety of plants, but we see there's a building, there's some paving that's been done. And so this is better, but I don't know that we would say that this is natural. It's obviously been contrived to look this way, even though there are natural elements in it. So here we see that this is better. There's a variety of plants. They've done a nice job of coaxing things to grow in the shade. And this is better, but is it natural? Are the plants there supposed to be there? And then finally, we might look at something like this and say, well, this sure looks more natural, doesn't it? And I would have to say, yes, there's a greater variety of plants. They're filling the available space. Everything looks happy and healthy. And if you look closely, most of the plants in this photograph are natives, and we'll get to what that means in a minute. So that's natural, occurs in nature. So what do we mean by organic? Now, when I first heard the term organic, I immediately thought organic chemistry, which was my worst class ever. But this is a completely different definition. And most people, when they hear organic, they think, oh, that's the expensive stuff in the supermarket that has not had any chemicals used on it. Well, there's actually a very official definition, and it comes from the Department of Agriculture. Now, this is the federal or the US Department of Agriculture. And it states that organic food is produced by farmers who emphasize renewable resources, soil conservation, water conservation, and protecting the environment for themselves and future generations. So if you get organic meat, poultry, eggs, and dairy products, and they're from animals that are given no antibiotics or growth hormones, that is considered organic produce. So the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, established a program for food for what they consider organic. And you may have seen this symbol if you shop in the organic section of the supermarket. This is a symbol that they're allowed to put on their produce if it is in fact has been grown or produced in an organic fashion. It's a certification program, and this is the symbol they're allowed to use. All right, so what are the standards if you're doing organic gardening? Because now we've been talking about farms and some meat producers. Well, there aren't any. There are no federal standards or requirements for organic land care that might be suitable for a homeowner or an apartment complex or parks. But anyone can voluntarily follow the guidelines for organic gardening, and Rutgers Cooperative Extension has promulgated them. You can find them online, and it will give you a good guide and basis on which to manage your property so that it is quote unquote organic. Now and part of that is what I'm going to be going over today. There's a third word that comes up a lot, and that is sustainable. So if you can sustain something, that means you can keep it going. But Congress has a specific definition. This is what is sustainable agriculture? Well, it's a system of production practices that over the long term not only meet our needs for food and fiber, etc., but also protect the environment and the natural resources upon which the economy depends. So Congress defined it for agriculture. Again, does this work for the home gardener? Because the home gardener, we want natural, organic, and sustainable vegetable gardens or flower beds or lawns or trees or shrubs. And so the question becomes now for us as home gardeners, how do we do this? So one of the first ideas put forward is, well, how about if we do nothing? Wouldn't that be natural? We would just let nature do whatever it is that nature's going to do out there. And actually, that doesn't quite fit, because what we have out there already is not natural. There's nothing natural about our gardens, our farms, our communities, our roads, our bridges. And over time, there have been a lot of invasive species introduced. Now, an invasive species is one that's not native. It didn't originate with the land, with the area. It's been introduced from somewhere else, and it becomes problematic. And if we don't do something, these invasives will continue to spread and crowd out our natives, which are the plants and animals and insects that we need to keep our gardens and our communities natural, organic, and sustainable. So our goals are to integrate 3 types of practices when we're gardening, with an eye towards recycling, balancing the ecology, and conserving biodiversity. Now, if you don't know what biodiversity is, bio means something alive and diverse means different things. So biodiversity is having a lot of different things. Like the pictures I showed you before, the first one had one hedge and some grass. But by the last one, we saw very many different types of flowering plants and greens. The idea is that the soil, plants, and animals depend on one another and they sustain one another. It's like the concept of a food web that you're probably taught in elementary school. In order to do this, we want to avoid using chemicals, and therefore we need a plan. We call it an integrated pest management plan to decrease the use of any type of synthetic or otherwise man-made or fake materials into our environment. Okay, so the idea, and you may have heard these words before, my parents were doctors, and when they took their medical oaths, one of the parts of the oath is that they will do no harm. And I took this to heart, not only because they were doctors, but also because the same applies when you're gardening, when you're taking care of your property. You don't want to do any harm, whether it's to your own property or your neighbor's property or the brook behind the house. So to do no harm, we have to protect the natural elements of our property, treat our landscape like a system, not just, well, there's the grass and there's the trees, but to think of it all as a connected system. We want to reduce how much energy, how much water, how much material that we have to input. A good way of doing this is to leave your grass clippings. I had a stern talk with my landscaper who mows our lawn, and I told him that he is leaving the grass clippings. He has a habit, I guess I must be one of his only customers who insists on it, but I want those grass clippings left because that is natural fertilizer. It goes right back into the soil. We want to maintain the health of the soil. We want to fertilize with naturally occurring materials, and we want to use cultural practices rather than chemical applications. And again, we want biodiversity. We want a lot of different living things. We don't want a monoculture, which is one thing. For example, an expansive front lawn of just grass is a monoculture. So how do we go about doing this? Well, I've outlined it in a few steps. And step number 1 is to take an inventory of your property. An inventory, everything. What is there? Where are the underground utilities? Does it have a slope? Where's the drainage? Do you have impermeable areas like a driveway? Where does the runoff go? Do you have mulch? What plants are there? Is there water on your property, et cetera, et cetera? And while you're doing an inventory, the single most important thing that you can be doing is to identify an immediate problem. Maybe there is a hazardous tree. The next windstorm, it's coming down. Maybe there are plants that are so infected with something that they're dying. Maybe you need to get them out of there before it spreads. So step 1, you've done your inventory, you know what you have and where it is. Step 2, you want to do an analysis of your property. And the first thing you truly need to know is where's the sun? Later on, and where people run into a lot of trouble, is trying to put plants in places where they're not going to be happy because they're going to get too much or too little sun. So really taking a careful look at your property and analyzing which way is north, which way is the sun moving across. Do you have a big tree that casts a big shadow? Does your house cast a big shadow? And take a look at the available sunlight. You might, at the end of this, come up with a little diagram. You'll see in the lower right that a compass has been put in so that you know which way is north, and the structures of the property have been put on. Where is their paving, the patio, the driveway? Where is their lawn? Do we want a flower bed? Do we want a play area for the children or grandchildren? So in your analysis, you also should probably do a soil test. Now, I had one done. It's not as hard as it sounds. You follow the instructions, and cost me $20. On the left, you'll see it's an envelope with a canvas bag attached to it. And inside the canvas bag was a plastic bag and a sheet of instructions telling me what to do. I followed the instructions. I gathered up the soil. I put it in the bag and tied that shut. And I sent it off to the soil lab, which is on Route 1 in, I want to say New Brunswick. It could be North Brunswick. Maybe the address is on here. South New Brunswick. There it is. And so then I got back via email, very convenient. I got back what you see on the right, which are the results of my soil analysis. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what they told me. So pH is a very important part of a soil analysis because certain plants will only grow under certain conditions. So for example, if you would like to grow blueberries, you are not going to be able to grow blueberries in my soil because my soil has a pH of 6. And blueberries really want it to be down around 4.5 or 5. So certain plants are going to do better in certain conditions. Mostly, we want our pH to be somewhere between 6 and 7 for most of the types of plants that we would want on our properties. So the other part of the soil analysis was the nutrients that are available to the plants that are growing there. And there are macronutrients and micronutrients. So macronutrients the plant needs in large amounts, and micronutrients the plants need in small amounts. So if you look at this, I loved it when I saw it. I said, oh, optimum, that means it's great. Until we got to calcium. And then I said, oh my goodness, is this a problem? And then I took a look at iron, and it said iron was high. I immediately went to my professors, and they explained that high iron is pretty typical. It's part of our clay type soil that we have in many areas of the state. The calcium, however, was a little bit shocking to him. Not shocking, but it was very curious. And eventually I realized that my property used to be an egg farm. And so there were chickens here and there were lots of eggs. And what are eggs made out of? They're made out of calcium. So over the many decades that this property was an egg farm, a lot of calcium built up in the soil. My professor was really very amused by that and told me he was going to be telling this story to his students in other classes, but that I had nothing to worry about. High calcium wasn't going to hurt anything. So armed with my soil analysis, I was very surprised to learn that I did not need to add lime to my lawn. Now, if I asked you to raise your hands, I bet a lot of you would raise your hands and say, oh yes, you know, we apply lawn, or our lawn care people who we hire, they apply lime. And we've been here about 6 years already. We've never added lime. And I thought for sure that we were going to have to. I was very surprised to learn that we didn't need to do any such thing. We didn't need to spend the money. We didn't need to hire anybody, that our soil is already in balance and we didn't have to do it. All right, so we're still in the analysis. I hope this works. I'm going to hit the button and you should see a video. Yes, it worked. So your property might have a natural water source. We have this very small pond all the way in the back of our property, and it was in bad shape. It was nasty, and we determined that the way to fix it was to put in one of these floating fountains. And sure enough, after a week or so of the fountain being on, the water turned crystal clear. I'm not so sure that the frogs and the toads are happy about it, but it made a big difference in the quality of the water and in eliminating mosquitoes. So you may not have a pond or a brook, but you need to know where your water drains. And if you have to water your property, where does that water come from? Okay, so we're still analyzing our property. And next, you want to know what kind of wildlife do you have? And is it a problem or is it a good thing? So if I were in a classroom with you and I were doing this, I would have people raising their hands. So if you want to raise your own hand at home, you can go right ahead, because I'll just imagine all your hands going up when I do this. Right? They're a problem. As a matter of fact, I was just telling the librarians before that I've been tasked with putting together an entire presentation just on deer. How about these guys? They can be a problem, but you can adjust for them. We have a lot of bunnies, and I have managed to figure out how to plant things so that the bunnies can still have what they need, but they leave my stuff alone. You might have a groundhog or a gopher, and when most people see these, they get very upset. And this is where I'm going to caution you, because not every caterpillar is bad. This one happens to be quite bad. Do you see the hook that it has on one end? That is a sure sign that you're looking at the hookworm caterpillar, and it will eat your peppers, it will eat your tomatoes. So these guys you don't like. So are there other creatures? I have several odd ones on my property. So for example, this is a picture in my parlor, and you'll notice that there appears to be something on the window. So you look closer and it's a bat. We have bats. I love bats. Bats eat tons of mosquitoes. They are a marvelous part of the ecosystem, but you don't want them in your house. We were able to remove the screen and tip the screen out, and the bat left. I did not want to hurt it. I mentioned frogs and toads before. So here is a huge bullfrog. This frog was easily the size of my entire hand. You're looking at it on a third floor bedroom. My dog brought it in. We didn't know it was there until we went into the bedroom, and furniture was moved and lampshades were askew. It was a mess. Apparently the dog caught the bullfrog, took it upstairs and let it go in the bedroom, and then proceeded to chase it around. We put it back out in the pot. Bullfrogs are also very good for the environment. They will eat mosquito larvae, they eat other insects, but you don't want them in your house. Now, I don't know if you can see it, and I don't know if you can see my mouse if I move it, but do you see right there? That is that hook of the hookworm. So this is that bad guy that you don't want on your vegetables. All of those white sacs are the eggs for this creature. Now, it's a parasitic wasp, and most people would see something like this and be very upset. I personally love insects. There are very few things I will kill. I will admit to killing horseflies and mosquitoes and ticks. That's about it. Everything else can stay. This happens to be a very beneficial wasp. It lays its eggs on these nasty caterpillars. And when the eggs hatch, they eat the caterpillar. So now you get more parasitic wasps that are going to help you eliminate more of these nasty caterpillars. It's a win-win for everybody. All right. Take a look at your plants. If you can, try and identify which ones are native or non-native or invasive. If you have invasive plants, for example, down south, they have a terrible time with a vine called kudzu, and they have entire teams of people who go out and rip it out along all of their waterways. Note where the wind blows, and do you have wind breaks? Because this will make a really big difference, particularly if you want to plant, say, a fig tree or sunflowers. The wind will make a big difference in how those plants survive. Identify any diseased plants, any weed problems, and look at what you're using your area for. So if you would like this beautiful fire pit to entertain, that's grand, but don't think that you're then going to be able to have your grandchildren play soccer there. So identify what areas you would like to use for what purposes when you are taking an inventory or making an analysis of your property. And one of the best things I ever did was to set up a recording documenting system. And I was overwhelmed with our property is large. It had been let go for probably 7 to 10 years. It had at one time been a formal English garden, and it was dilapidated. It was in really bad shape. And I took one look at it and just, I was dismayed. And I knew that I was going to have to plant a lot of plants, and not all of them were going to make it. And I needed to be able to keep track. So this is the simplest thing I could come up with. I got an envelope, I labeled it front. I labeled one flower beds. I labeled one around the pool. And there was one more area. And every time I bought a plant, I would take the label and I would put it in the envelope that corresponded to it. Now, if the next year that plant didn't make it, I would go to that envelope and I would find that tag and I would take it out, put an X on it, and know that I shouldn't buy that again, or that perhaps I had made a mistake and I had put it in the wrong environment for that particular plant. All right, so you're now ready to go out shopping and you want to buy plants, but you need to choose the right plants. And all of these tags, let me see if I can go back a second. Does it show on here? No. I should probably add a picture with a plant tag that shows it. But if you look at a plant tag, they will always tell you the hardiness zone. And what that's saying is how cold can it get, and that plant will survive the winter. So the zones range from 1A to 13B, I believe. I can't read it. And you'll notice that the lower numbers, the 1As, those are plants that can survive when it's very, very cold. But we're going to zoom in New Jersey. New Jersey is basically a 6A to 7B. So you can get any plant that has a hardiness zone 7B or lower. Now, could you plant something that has a hardiness rating of 10? Sure you can, but that's going to be an annual. It's only going to last you that year. It is not going to come back the next year because the cold will kill it. So one thing we've noticed is that something is happening to these zones over time. And if we were in the classroom, I would encourage you to have a discussion about this and to answer the question, why is this happening? But in this case, I'll just tell you. What's happening is that the zones are shifting, and they're shifting because of climate change. We're now finding that these, like the 7B is moving up. Everything's moving north, including, for example, the goldfinch, which is the New Jersey state bird. 7 years ago when we moved here, we had a lot of them. And now we're lucky if we get just a few. It turns out that it is too hot here now for the goldfinches to be able to raise their young. And so they are moving farther north to get a little bit cooler. The same is happening with our plants. It's getting too hot around here. And so a couple of years ago, the American Horticultural Society decided to publish another map. And they're calling it the heat zone map. And what they're saying, we'll zoom into New Jersey so it's easier to understand. They're saying that not only do we have to select plants that are going to survive the cold in the winter, we also have to consider how much heat can they tolerate. And so this shows you the number of days a year that it's over 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So New Jersey is somewhere from, let's say, the light blue, like a 4 to a 7. So we can have up to, say, 90 days that are over 86 degrees. Now, some plants can tolerate when it gets hot, especially if you help them out a little bit with some extra water or maybe give them some shade. But when you get more and more and more hot days, especially when they're in the row, the news reporters call that a heat wave, then you start having problems with the survivability of the plants. And so this was the American Horticultural Association's attempt to quantify this and to start giving some guidance. Now, the plant tags will not have this information on them, but it is something that we're moving toward. So you're choosing the right plants, and your best bet is to pick what's called a native plant. I was in a garden center recently, and they had one whole display that was only for natives, and I was thrilled. Of course, it was small compared to the size of the rest of the place, but at least they had actually pointed out which plants are native to or occur naturally in this area. And why is it so important to look at natives? Well, they have already formed healthy relationships with everything else in their environment. They offer sustainability to all of the other plants and animals, and they will do well in the conditions that you already have, whether it's moisture or weather. And that means that you will have less work to do. You won't have to water as much. You won't have as many pest problems. You won't have to use chemicals. The soil quality will be improved because those are the plants that are supposed to be there. Now, the others, we call them non-native or invasive plants. Well, they're from someplace else in the world, and they were introduced here. They either don't exist in nature at all because we created them, or they got here from someplace else. And unfortunately, they don't support wildlife as well as the native plants. And sometimes they can escape into the environment and they cause a lot of problems. You may have heard of the spotted lanternfly, which is a beautiful insect that got here, I think, from, I want to say China, but I don't want to just blame China. I want to just say that it came from another continent where it's perfectly natural over there, and there are predators to take care of it over there. But once it ended up here, this is a different environment for it. There were no natural predators. And now the spotted lanternfly is killing our trees. And that we would consider an invasive pest. All right, so if you're choosing the right plants, one of the best things to do to buy natives is to find a garden center that actually sells natives. And some of them specialize in natives. So towards the bottom, you'll see Rare Find Nursery in Jackson. They specialize in natives. And then there are some smaller ones where you can find them. And I encourage you to go into your local garden center and say, I would like to buy natives. Please show me what you have. And if they can't do that, then you might want to impress upon them the fact that they should have a section for the native plants. Okay. Do you add fertilizer? Well, that depends on what your soil test said. Because remember, I thought for sure we were going to have to add lime, and we didn't. So you need to know what's in your soil already. What do the plants need that you're going to put in? And other considerations such as how much rain and the temperature. So let's take a look at the difference between an organic fertilizer and a synthetic fertilizer. So organic fertilizer comes from nature already, whether it's a plant or an animal, comes from something that was once living. Synthetic fertilizers do not. We make them, sort of like you make it in a lab. They make it in a factory. Organic fertilizer will improve your soil. A synthetic fertilizer will not. Organic slowly releases the nutrients to the plants. Synthetic fertilizers do not. And there's a big problem with this. A lot of people think that, oh, I'm going to use one of these very popular, say, Miracle Grow, which I will never use. I'm going to use that because I put it in and all of a sudden the plant is flowering and it looks great. Well, what happens is that you burn out your plant. It's almost like if you've taken amphetamines or you've drunk a pot of coffee because you're trying to stay awake and then you crash afterwards. The same thing happens to the plant. With organic fertilizer, you have minimal burning potential or none. And the last thing is with organic fertilizer, you don't have to apply it as often. With the synthetic fertilizer, it has to be reapplied. And this is where the lawn care companies have got you. They put you on a schedule and we need to add this and we need to add it again and then we need to add it again. And you really don't. You don't need any of that if you can add more organic fertilizer. So what's a natural or organic fertilizer? Oh, slides are reversed. That's the next slide. So the advantages of an organic fertilizer: releases the food slowly. It improves your soil. It improves the soil's ability to hold water and to hold other nutrients. You can't harm your plants. There's no toxic buildup, particularly of salts, which can be a problem. And because it's natural, it's renewable, biodegradable, sustainable, and environmentally friendly. And what's more, you can make your own. Now, I'm not going to go into composting. You can take entire college courses in composting, but doing your own backyard composting is a marvelous way to add fertilizer. I have a small tumbler composter where we put our kitchen scraps, and I mix it in with I make my own soil, but that's another story. And it's all natural. I never, for my regular plants, have to add anything. If I do have to add something, there's one product, and I hope I have it in a later slide. There is one product that I highly recommend. So natural soil and plant supplements. Here's a list of some of them. We've all heard of manure. There are some others that have become popular recently. I'm very happy to see that even some of the big box stores carry them. Things like kelp, blood, and bone meal. I have not seen cottonseed feather or soybean meal. However, a lot of the fish fertilizers are now on the market. So these are all natural, and whatever you happen to find. I'm going to take a minute and mention green sand marl, which probably none of you have heard of. Green sand marl is a naturally occurring substance in the soils of New Jersey. It is unique to New Jersey. It's not found anyplace else. And the green sand marl, the discovery of this is what led to New Jersey becoming the garden state, because we were able to grow so much food to allow New York and Philadelphia to prosper and for their populations to increase, as well as our own population, because we had this naturally occurring marvelous material in our soils that was then shipped around to all the farms in the state. I couldn't resist this next slide. composted cow manure is great. It's a little smelly, but it is the single best that you can put on your plants. I often get questions about, well, what about other manures? And the answer is no. There are any number of reasons that you don't want to use, for example, horse or goat or chicken is another one that I get questions about. When you're looking at manure, you really just need to stick to cow. Another great way to fertilize your lawn is to add micro clover. Now, most people are always trying to get rid of clover in their lawn. I've decided that if it's green, it gets to stay. From a distance, it looks like grass. Clover has a unique ability to fix nitrogen. In other words, it is adding nitrogen it takes out of the air and putting it into the ground as fertilizer. So when you have clover, you are actually fertilizing your lawn just by having it growing there. There is this brand or type, it's called micro clover, and it's so small that when it's growing amidst your grass, you don't notice it. And so that might be preferable to people who really just can't give up this idea of having the perfect lawn. So natural fertilizers that you should be able to find locally, blood meal. This raises nitrogen. So if you look at the leaf on the right, you'll notice how it's yellowed. That's a sign of a nitrogen deficiency. And the lower right, you'll see that that leaf is turning red. Now that's often a sign of a phosphorus deficiency. So blood meal is better for one, bone meal is better for the other. There are also kelp. This is kind of like a seaweed. And this has been used for centuries. Now, I gave this presentation a couple of years ago in a library when we could do these things. And an older woman raised her hand and she wanted to comment that she's from Ireland. And in Ireland, there was a time of year when all of the farmers would go down to the sea and they would rake up all of the seaweed and then they would haul it back up the hill to the farms and spread it out. And it was nice that I helped her make that connection and that memory that we've known that these things work, but we got away from it and now it's coming back. Now, something else that we've always known and got away from is what the American Indians used to do. Now, all of us, I hope, were taught this in elementary school. And the American Indians used to put a fish in the hole before they planted their corn. And that was because the fish, as it decomposed, had all of the nutrients that the plants needed to grow. And so now in most of the stores, you can now find fish-based fertilizers that are natural and organic. So it all comes around again. I mentioned compost briefly before. I take all my fruit and vegetable scraps and I put them in a small container, and then I take them out to my little tumbler. What the woman is using is a different type of composter. And basically, you mix it, and a year later, you have marvelous material that you can then add to your property. These pictures are showing you two different ways to add the compost, one through a spreader, like you might add grass, assuming that the material, your compost material, will go through the spreader. And otherwise, raking it out is good exercise to get it spread out on your lawn. And of course, keep in mind that you can be doing this in your vegetable garden, in your flower beds, etc. So why are we staying away from, I call them all of the sides, like pesticide? So when you buy one of these products, or don't buy it, just read the label. When you read the label, the government requires that these products get what they call a caution word, a danger word. So it's either danger warning or caution. And caution is the one that you will be sold to the regular consumer like us. The ones that say warning, you have to have an applicator's license. So that would be somebody who is trained, and they're the ones who show up in a truck and start spraying things everywhere. But even if you look at a caution sign, you'll notice that it says caution, but it says keep out of reach of children. And that bothered me. So I looked into it a little bit. Oh, and you'll find these labels on all of these things: pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, miticides. Like I said, the sides. And basically, all this means is kill, kill, kill. You're killing a pest, you're killing a weed, you're killing insects, fungus, mites. But these products are synthetic and they are toxic. That's why they kill, because they are toxic. Unfortunately, they're also toxic to us. They've been linked to many diseases, and most recently, the American Academy of Pediatrics, this was one of their first reports in 2012. They have stated that children are particularly vulnerable to all of these sides, and that it can affect them with cancers, decreased brain function, and behavior problems. And it's not just children. I've heard stories of pets becoming very ill from walking across someone's lawn after their lawn care people had been there and sprayed. We have never allowed our dogs to walk on someone's lawn. The companies are supposed to put those little signs up saying pesticide treated area. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But we try to know who's using these companies and who's not, and we keep our pets and our grandchild off of it. They're very harmful to the environment. And while the EPA regulates these products, it has only done so based on the product itself and how it affects whatever it is it's supposed to kill. There have not been studies on the long-term risk of using them. What happens if you've done it for 2 years or 5 or 10 or 20 or 40? There are no studies on all of the other ingredients that are in there with the toxic chemical. What if you are using multiple different toxic chemicals? There's no information on what the cumulative effects are of being exposed to more than 1, 2, 3, etc. And unfortunately, they take a very long time to withdraw them from the market, even after they've been banned or said that this is no longer safe and you shouldn't use it. In addition, the pesticides cause pollution, particularly in the water. You saw earlier I had my little pond with the fountain, and behind that is a brook that runs through a couple of counties. And if we used any type of synthetic materials on our property, it would be going straight into the pond and the brook and being sent to the surrounding lakes, etc., where it would be killing things that live in the water and insects that are good for you. And we're going to be taking a look at some of those. And overall, these chemicals disrupt the natural balance in your soil, and they decrease the soil fertility. So we have this word, this is where I started with this idea of natural and organic. If it's organic, does that mean it's safe? And if we were in the classroom, we'd be having a little discussion right now, and then I would show you these pictures. Well, snake venom is organic. Skunk spray is organic. Sulfur from a volcano is organic, and even is the ocean water. But are they safe? Not necessarily. It depends on how you approach them, if you approach them at all. So just because it says organic doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. So we need to look at this in an integrated fashion. We need to manage our problems at acceptable levels, not pure elimination. You are never going to have every blade of grass a blade of grass without a single weed. It's not going to happen, and you're going to have to accept that. You can prevent most of your problems by picking the right plant for the right place and giving it the best conditions you can for it to survive, and using chemicals only as a last resort. Now, I have a plant. It is a hibiscus, and every year it gets sawfly. And the sawfly lays its eggs, and I have these little teensy tiny, look like inchworms almost, and they drill holes right through all the leaves. And the year before last, I almost lost the entire plant, and it's big. It's got to be 4 feet high, 2.5 feet wide, has these gorgeous blossoms, and the entire plant was going to die. And at a certain point, I had no choice, but I did not select a synthetic chemical. I chose one that I'll be showing you a list of in a minute. And I didn't apply it to the entire flower bed. I actually went out there leaf by leaf with my hands, and I applied the chemical to just that plant. And thank goodness I did, because that year I was very lucky, and growing right next to it was a beautiful fennel that was covered with black swallowtail butterfly caterpillars. So we need to understand all of the factors that are going to influence the health of your plant. Here's a list of them. Everything that you can do to keep your plant healthy so that you do not have to use any chemicals. You want to get rid of the sides, with one exception, insecticidal soap. And here's a list of what we consider our approved products for pest control. So there they are. And you still have to be careful, because an insecticidal soap will kill beneficial insects. It will kill the ones that you want to save. So this is what I did when I did it leaf by leaf, because I didn't want to kill anything else. So if you see this caterpillar, please don't kill it, because it will become a monarch butterfly. And if you see this one, you're going to get a yellow swallowtail. And if you see that caterpillar, you're going to get a black swallowtail. That happens to be the New Jersey state butterfly. And I try and help them out. I let them eat my fennel and my parsley and my carrots. And when they make their chrysalis, I keep them safe, because they'll stay in their chrysalis all winter. And I just released my first one last week. I have, I think, 5 more waiting for it to get warm. Hopefully they'll emerge this week, because it's going to be so warm. And please don't kill the bees. There are a lot of native bees in this poster, which is very difficult to read at this scale, but I just wanted you to get the idea. I think that it shows 18 different native bees. Now, these are bees that belong here. They pollinate our flowers and our crops, and they help you continue having more flowers. So I planted some beautiful columbine, and the bees pollinated all of the flowers. And this year I have a blanket of columbine because they pollinated the flowers. The seeds were all fertile. They fell, and I got more plants that I didn't have to do any work for or spend any money on. Now, some insects don't just pollinate, they are actually predators. So we call them the ladybugs. Officially, they're called ladybird beetles. Here are 6 insects that will eat the bad insects that you don't want. So you really have to think about what are you killing, because these are 6, and there are many, many more that you actually want to leave alone. Let them do their thing. All right. So let's say you have a problem, and this is my pet peeve problem. I have a lot of pathways that are brick or made of pavers. And I do battle with the weeds in the cracks, and it is keeps me up at night. It makes me crazy. We also have an area that is quite shady, and if we're not careful, it can get very slippery, and you can hurt yourself by slipping on this mossy algae material that builds up. So what do? You don't want to leave it like this. Sure, you can go out there and you can pull up all those weeds and all those cracks. It's backbreaking work. Well, I have a simple solution. Buy white vinegar, very inexpensive, and a really inexpensive sprayer. I got one at Home Depot for about $11. Some people will tell you to dilute the vinegar. I tried that, doesn't work. I use it full strength. I would pour the vinegar into the sprayer, pump it up, and go out there and hit that brick and hit those weeds. Now, it is far more effective if you pick the weeds out first and then spray. Because now if you just spray, all of that stuff is not going to get brown and dead. And you'll either have to sweep it away or scrape it away or hope that it gets blown away. And you aren't assured that the vinegar has gotten down into that crack. So even though it's backbreaking work, I started in April, and I went through and I weeded out everything and I sprayed. And what ended up happening, because I started so early, I have had very little trouble. It's very easy now for me to stay on top of it. In the past, when I was working and I didn't get out of work until towards the end of June, the weeds had just gotten out of control, but I simply hadn't had the time to be out in the garden to deal with them. But the earlier you start, the better. So supposing you have these on your plants, what do? Well, that insecticidal soap that I mentioned before, or a product called neem oil. Please follow the instructions on the containers. How about slugs? Now, a lot of people complain about them. I don't have any. So I don't know why I don't have any, but I don't have any. This has never been a problem in my garden. I have a feeling it's because we have a lot of other wildlife that likes to eat these things. But if you have them as a problem, you can sprinkle diatomaceous earth. These slugs will crawl over this material and it kills them, but it only kills them because they have a very soft body. It doesn't kill any other insects that have hard shells. My message, please be patient. An organic landscape that is healthy and functioning properly can take you 3 years to establish. We've been here 7 years and I'm still working on it, but I have an enormous property. Some additional pieces of advice. As soon as you see a damaged plant, remove it. Install barriers to keep pests out. Till in the fall. Hand-pick pests off your plants. You can drown them in soapy water. I can't bring myself to do this. Like I said before, there's only 3 things that I'll kill. And it really pains me to kill anything else. Encourage there to be enough air getting around your plants. Grow pest-resistant or pest-tolerant plants. Be very careful of the timing of your planting. It is very unwise to plant something in the ground for the first time in July or August. It's simply too hot and that plant is under too much stress. Consider raised beds, which was the topic of my last talk. Harvest anything that's ready to be harvested as soon as it's ready. And if I had to pick one that I thought was one of the most important here, I would say it's the last one. Practice good garden sanitation. If a plant is sickly and some leaves have fallen, clean them all up. Leaving them there just allows them to blow onto something else or to rain splatter onto something else. and allows the disease to spread. Some other examples of cultural practices, if you have voles that burrow underground, you can plant garlic at the edge of your flower beds. And as the voles are tunneling, they hit those garlic roots. They don't like it. They turn direction. If you have cucumber beetles, you can try planting amaranth. The beetles like the amaranth better than the cucumbers, and they'll go to the amaranth instead. So it's a sacrificial plant. Plant marigolds in your garden. These help control a type of pest in the soil called the nematode. When your plants are first starting out, consider putting these little collars around them. You can make them out of anything. You could even use toilet paper rolls until they get too wet. You could take a plastic cup and cut off the bottom, and this will protect the plant until it can grow large enough that it doesn't need the collar around it anymore. At flower beds, decrease, do you like that? Get it? Flower bed. It's not mine. I stole it. Add flower beds so that you have less lawn. You're increasing the diversity or the numbers in different kinds of plants that you have. And you're also increasing and attracting the beneficial insects. Apply mulch. This helps cut down on weeds and it helps to retain water. And as you can see here, there are lots and lots of different kinds of mulch that you can put down. The one I would not recommend is that dyed bark. Is very popular. There's a red version, there's a black version. I told my landscaper, please bring mulch, and he brought the black stuff. I didn't know any better. I wasn't a master gardener yet. He spread it all over, and it sure did look pretty. The contrast, the green against the black. And then my white dog went out there and rolled in it, and my white dog was not white anymore and needed a bath. So this was a problem, and I told him never again. From now on, I don't want anything with dye in it. I just want plain bark mulch. But there are other choices, as you can see here. Remember that you can plant in the shade, and creating a nice garden in the shade is a marvelous way of helping the environment and the creatures that can live in there. And as much as we hate weeds, and I don't think anybody hates weeds more than me, weeds have a job. And if you have weeds, that means that there's something wrong with your soil. The job of weeds is to hold the soil in place until a different plant can grow. Soil is extremely valuable. It can take 100 years for nature to make 1 inch of soil. And that's what weeds are for. Nature made soil. We don't want to lose it. The weeds grow. Left to their own devices, eventually something else will grow there. But we as gardeners really don't like them. And the easiest way to get rid of a weed is to shade them out. When you plant natives together in a flower bed and you give each plant the space it needs, well, this one is going to be 1.5 feet and this one's going to be 6 inches, and you put them in together, so that they each have their area, but each one's area touches the next one's area. Underneath all of that, you have shade. And all those plants are holding your soil. The weeds don't have a job to do there, and so they won't grow. For your lawn, please change your expectations. It shouldn't be perfect. Mow high, we recommend 3 inches. Leave the grass clippings, add compost, water less, but for a longer period of time. Use organic products, add seed every year, and aerate. And remember, it might not be perfect, but it's going to be healthy. So be realistic, be patient. It takes time and it takes ability. And whether that is that you have to learn like I did, or you have to ask for help. And now my knees are so bad, I have to ask for help. And if you need advice, you can call the Master Gardener helpline, and that's the number. And every second and fourth Friday, it's my turn. And I'm the one answering the calls and answering the emails. So if you'd like to reach me, you can do that. I just did it this past Friday, so I won't be there again until the 28th at the end of the month. And that's that. I am done.
All right, thank you so much. That was very informative, and we do have a few questions.
Yeah, I know it was a lot of information, but
Yeah,
go
well,
ahead.
and if anyone has any more questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat here and I can read them out.
Okay.
So the first question we have, it says, where should we send soil analysis if we do not live in New Jersey?
Okay. Rutgers University is what's called a land grant college. Back in the 1800s, every state identified a land grant college. And those colleges then run a variety of agricultural programs for the state. That's how we have Master Gardeners here in New Jersey. So if you are not in New Jersey, you need to find out which university is your land grant college. And it may also be called the Extension Service. And then you'll be able to get to your soil lab.
Okay.
There should be one for at least every state.
Okay, perfect. And let's see, the next question we have here is micro clover bought as seed?
Is it, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of it. Is micro clover bought?
As seed?
Yes, and you're not going to find it in the store. I have not looked in some of the specialized garden centers, but I doubt it. I ordered mine online.
Okay.
I could come up with the information about where to order it. I know that we were given that information in the Master Gardening class. It wasn't expensive either, and you need a very small amount. So you have your grass seed, and then it's a certain percentage. Like if you have this much grass seed, you're adding this much micro clover. It's a relatively small amount. We did our whole property and I still have it left over. So I'm going to do it again this year.
Okay, thank you.
You can try searching for it online. Another trick for everybody, whenever you're doing a search that has something to do with plants and agriculture. So let's say you want to know how to take care of a holly tree. You type in taking care of holly tree extension. Every time you add the word extension, your search is being limited to the land grant universities. And they will have fact sheets and blogs or however else they're presenting themselves that are coming straight from the research universities and the professors. And that is the best information you can find.
All right, wonderful. Let's see, I have one more question in the chat, and I think there might be someone who'd like to ask the question out loud.
Oh, yes, I see a hand up.
Yeah, so the question I have in the chat from Angie is, can you do soil testing anytime or is it during a
Oh, that's
time?
a nice question. And I don't know that I know the answer to that. I don't think it matters, other than you certainly don't want to do it in the winter because you do have to dig down a certain number of inches. So if it's very cold or frozen, or if there's snow covering or a lot of leaves covering, so you would want to do it any other time other than that. Now also consider the timing. So let's say you decide to go out and do your soil sample in April. By the time you take it, get it to the lab, they analyze it. Let's say now it's the end of May. Well, you may have missed your window to apply something that the soil test is going to tell you to apply. So I don't know that either that or I can't remember when I did mine. I want to say I did it in the summer, but then I knew that whatever I was going to do was going to wait till the next year.
Okay. Thank you. And let's see, the hand went down, but I'm just gonna take this person off mute if they want to ask their question out loud. Let me do that right here.
Well, there isn't that big a group, so I don't think that we would have, a lot of times there's too much interference and you lose the connection if there are too many people talking. But this is
Right.
a smallish group, so I think we might get away with it.
Let's see what happens. Oh, I don't know.
No,
Maybe,
anybody have a question?
oh, maybe not.
Maybe, Tanisha.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, you go ahead.
Now we have questions.
Hi. So I recently moved where I am like about a couple of years ago, and I was always like wondering because I don't know what they put into the lawn. I know sometimes they may use like maybe not so organic stuff or so.
Yeah.
Or not
If
so
you had
stuff.
the prior owner had one of those services, I can guarantee you they didn't do a single natural thing. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm always like skeptical of using the grass clippings. Is that like too much? I mean, I don't know. I'm always skeptical of using the grass clipping as compost.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's fine. As long as you're not adding anything else, the grass clippings are fine to put into the compost. What you don't want is you don't want your lawn care company to come and spray all that stuff and then you collect the grass clippings because now all that stuff is going in your compost. But if you haven't added anything, then you should be fine either to leave the grass clippings on the lawn or to take the grass clippings and put them in your composter. That was a good
And
question.
then I can reuse it on my vegetable garden.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. I have a big problem with squirrels.
Ah,
Uh-huh.
I have them on my porch, which is on the second floor. They come up the stairs like they own the place.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
They ate my flowers and my tomatoes, and they run between the walls in my house.
Are you sure that's squirrels?
Well, he didn't eat it. It seems like he was angry and he bit off the flowers from the rose. He bit the rose petals from the plant, and he just, it was scattered all around.
They're not angry. They're just doing what squirrels do. I have a squirrel problem, and I've solved it by I have bird feeders, and the bird feeders, there are baffles on the pole, so the squirrels can't get up, but the squirrels are friends with the birds, and the birds drop a lot of seeds. And so the squirrels will go around the bottom on the lawn under the bird feeders, and they will eat that. That's keeping them, for the most part, away from everything else. They're hungry, and there has to be something in the environment for them to eat. I haven't found squirrels to just kill things for the sake of killing things. They will, however, dig. So I've just planted today. I put in some plants, and I know that they will go out there and they like to dig them and the chipmunks because they like the new, very soft, fresh roots from a new plant that you've just put in. I try to cover with mulch to keep them away. A good dog can help with squirrels and chipmunks, or hawks. We have more hawks this year than in the past, and I suspect I'm going to have fewer chipmunks and rabbits because now I have hawks. The more you leave it alone out there, the more plants there are, the more trees there are, the fewer chemicals, the healthier everything is, the more wildlife you have. So for example, we go outside and we don't get mosquito bites. And people have said to me, how come we're not getting mosquito bites? And here we are sitting outside on your property. And my answer is that I'm very careful about standing water. And because I haven't used any chemicals, I haven't killed anything, I have all of the creatures there that will eat the mosquitoes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Right.
does. Okay.
And if all else fails, I've taken to chasing the grackles. I hate grackles. And I know when they're migrating through, and I actually will stay on my porch and yell and clap my hands and chase them away. And they've learned that they're not welcome here. You might want to try something like that with the squirrel. Every time you see it, you run out there and clap your hands or shoot it with a water from a hose or something, and they'll get the message.
Oh, okay. I'll try that. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question?
Okay.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again, Pat, for speaking.
Thank you for having me.
And just to remind everyone to check out the calendar on the website. We have lots of great upcoming programs. And thank you again all for coming. And yeah, have a nice night.
All
Okay.
right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Let me
Good night.
make sure I hit the right buttons here. That one.